Hello, people of Earth, other planets, other organisms. This is Stephen Casimiro from Adventure Journal with Justin Hausman, our senior editor. Welcome to the AJ podcast. Justin, what up?
Good morning. Just enjoying a little bit of sun after some 2 rainy days in a row, which is awesome for October. Love to see that.
Excellent. It rained down here last night. So what's your soil like? Can you get out? Does it drain well? Can you get out when it's raining and not really trash the trails? Because you can't do that. We have so much clay here. You just got to stay off it for days.
It's pretty clayey. It's actually a huge bummer because we get a lot of people that don't observe that rule and will ride anyway. We only have one really good mountain bike loop here that's built for mountain bikes. They'll chain that off. But every time it rains, and especially if it's been raining for 4 days, you'll see guys riding around just in town, running around, and they're muddy. And I'm like, ugh, where have you been riding? Surely you're messing something up. It also makes us look bad. I'm in a constant battle with anti-mountain bike people around here, and it doesn't help when people are out running up the trails. So unfortunately, you kind of put it away. But the gravel, fire roads are fine. So that just becomes more gravel time.
For those of you who don't know, and I'm guessing that's everybody, Justin lives in Marin.
Yes.
The irony of Marin is that it is the home of the Mountain Biking Hall of Fame and also one of the most restrictive places to actually ride your mountain bike.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody really knows for sure why that is. I sort of assume that it's because, people started mountain biking here in the 70s and nobody really knew what to make of it. And so they just made it illegal on trails. And everywhere else has kind of figured out, it's probably fine to share some trails and to get mountain bikes on it. But around here, it's just sort of stuck.
I think it's also part of the strength of the hiking coalition and the equestrian coalition. So last night, I was thinking about which would you rathers. And I am so bad at which would you rathers, especially in a group situation, where we got to do which would you, I just totally choke. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking a little bit about spooky season, which we are entering. And so I have one for you. Don't judge me if you think it's lame. Which would you rather, to have expanded vision so that you could see other light waves like ultraviolet, or to have echolocation like a bat?
So what do you, I know that birds and insects and maybe fish can see in other light waves that we can't see. I desperately want to see what they get to see. I feel like we're missing out on the full picture. For all we know, there's gorgeous scenes all the time. If you can see an ultraviolet light that they can see that we can't see, that would be pretty cool. But unless you're, it just isn't, it's not gonna really help you. It's just pretty to look at. But think about how easy it would be to avoid cars while you're walking around, while you're riding a bike. If you could echolocate, you could. I just feel like that'd be more helpful. You'd hear people coming from long ways away. You could watch your kids without having to think about it. Everything at night is more accessible.
On the other hand, if you have the sensibility, if you can sense like a bat, wouldn't it drive you nuts knowing where all those bugs are?
Well, I was just going to say, you could also eat bugs all the time so easily. Your bug eating that would just skyrocket.
But could you? Because our reaction time is not the same as bats.
Good point.
You could get a lot of protein, but so
would you be able to communicate through echolocation?
Ooh, yeah. Why not?
Let's
say that you can.
Be epic. Because that kind of sonar counts, right? So I could be out surfing and dip my head into the water and oh my God, imagine how that would be amazing. Putting your head under the water in the ocean and just instantly getting a map of where all the animals are would be pretty cool.
That'd be pretty rad.
Yeah. I choose that.
Okay, you choose that. I think I do too.
Yeah.
So spooky season, I am ready. I am wearing my pumpkin spice deodorant. And
Are you serious? Does that mean that you just splashed a latte on your armpits? That's fantastic.
Yeah. There's a lot of mysteries in the outdoor space. There are so many incidents of people disappearing and not being found. And the one that has fascinated me more than any other is the story of Dyatlov Pass in the Soviet Union, in Russia, Siberia, in 1959. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, but no, I'm not I'm not deep in the Dyatlov Pass Reddit forums. So we wrote about it. Somebody wrote about it on AJ. But it wasn't me, so I've read that article. But that's pretty much it. What were we talking?
Steve, it was Steve Hawk did it, and
Hawk
did it, and I had done a lot of research at that point, and I handed off all my research to him, and he did a really nice job with it. It is an enduring mystery. It is something that's always fun to contemplate, especially as Halloween approaches. So the short version, I'll give you a quick overview. So it's 1959. It is, as I mentioned, Soviet Union, and a group of it started out as 10, but a group of 9 ski tourers went into the Ural Mountains in Siberia, part of Siberia, and never returned. And they all died, and they died under mysterious circumstances that have fueled endless conspiracy theories, leaning on mistrust of the Soviet government and authorities. And it continues to fascinate people today. So we're going to unpack that. I'm going to take you through the timeline, and we're going to talk about what happened. Some of the crazier theories include maybe they were attacked and killed by a Yeti. Maybe they were murdered by the local indigenous people, who are the Mansi, is their name.
Interesting. Okay.
They perhaps could have been attacked or in some way affected by a UFO.
Classic.
Yes, by escaped convicts.
Okay.
By a government military test weapon gone awry. Let me think now. What else do we have in this?
I mean, that's everything. Is there?
No, it's not everything. Actually, there's more. Being killed by KGB for some reason. Infrasound, which is one of the more interesting ideas
like a weapon.
No, like a naturally occurring infrasound.
Cool. I hope it's that.
Wind. And an avalanche. So there's a lot to unpack here.
What's the official? Is there an officially licensed version?
Yes, there is an official, which I will get to a little bit later.
Okay.
So it's 1959, and this is a group of, we'll call them, they're young adults. People kind of refer to them as kids. The oldest, I think, was 27. He was sort of an outlier. And then all the other members of the group, they were students at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in, make sure, I don't know if I can pronounce this right. I don't speak Russian, but it's Sverdlovsk, which I believe is...
That sounds right.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So these were all really interesting young adults. They were movers and shakers. And the head dude is a guy named Igor Dyatlov, and Igor was 23. So the culture in the Soviet Union at the time, there was very much a kind of a Soviet youth, good communist citizen, comrade element to the zeitgeist. And these kids were all very much a part of that. They took their roles seriously. And one of the requirements or responsibilities or values of that time was that you were going to be a strong, capable comrade. And the Soviets, to their credit, really, I don't know if indoctrinated is the right word, but indoctrinated people on health, on strength, and actually on adventure. And they called them, so this group they're often called hikers or tourists. Those terms they're not analogous to how we think of them now. But basically they were ski adventurers.
Oh,
and
they were on skis.
They were on skis.
Skis. Okay.
Yes. And I apologize to everybody if I left that out. So these were ski tours. They were on a backcountry ski trip, and they disappeared and all were found dead. So they were part of an outdoor club or group. There was more to this than just like a casual school group. There were rating systems. They would get certified depending on their level of expertise. And so most of the people in this group had their level 2 certification, and they were going to tackle this major ski traverse, or I think it was a traverse. They were going to do traverse and then train back through the Urals as part of getting their class 3 certification, which I believe was the highest at the time. So they were leveling up. Basically.
What the Urals are, they're not big, right? I don't know a whole lot about the Urals. What's the couple
they're not
thousand
high.
feet at most? Yeah.
Yeah, they're not high, but there's a long chain, and I couldn't tell you exactly. They're several hundred miles, maybe longer. So, like, I think that the Urals extend as far south as Sverdlovsk, sorry. And they go way up to the north. I don't know if they go all the way up to the Arctic, but their route from the city where they lived to where they were skiing was about 300 miles.
Oh, shit. Okay.
So pretty long.
Yeah.
But the mountains that this all occurred in it was around 3,500, 4,000 feet. So,
okay,
we're not talking the Alps or the Sierra. So they weren't really dealing with altitude, but this is a part of Siberia, and it's Russia in the winter. So, okay. So the scene is that it's a group of experienced ski tourers, experienced outdoor kids. Some of them have been to this area before. Igor Dyatlov is a very experienced at leading groups. He is I believe he's universally admired. He's a natural leader. He's been to this particular area before. There are also other groups of ski tourers in this area. So it's a pretty remote place, but there are other groups going out at that time in that area who are not unfamiliar with this. It's remote, it's rural, it's desolate, it's the freaking middle of winter, but it's not completely unknown territory to these folks. So now a wrinkle in all of this is that this is also the heart of military country and gulag country. And so for those who have forgotten their Russian history or their Soviet history, it was before the Soviet Union broke up. It was Russia had brought together this series of SSRs. Russia was the main one, and the Soviet way, going back to the Stalin era, Stalin would imprison people that he didn't agree with or his political opponents through this system of prisons, these notoriously brutal prisons called gulags. So this is the heart of gulag country. It's also the heart of military development country. Pretty remote area, and a great place, sort of like Nevada for the U.S., like a great place to put secret military institutions.
Were they allowed to be there? Like, is it public land, or I don't know what the Russian system is. I mean, were they trespassing on gulag or military property or anything like that, as far as you know?
They were not, and I don't know exactly whether it was a collective land ownership. I don't know.
But it was okay for them to be there.
It was okay for them to be there. Historically, it was the land of the Mansi, who, typical for indigenous people, kept getting squeezed and less room. But there was nothing illegal or improper about where they were. They had full permission from the authorities. Okay. So the authorities with the college were fully behind this. But the larger scene is that they're going into an area, like, sort of imagine if you were like, in between the Nevada state prison system and Area 51, like you're going to the Toyabe Mountains of Nevada, which, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, but there's all this other weird stuff. And all of this becomes really relevant after they're discovered, as people start to imagine what's going on. So let me skip through the timeline. There's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. One of Justin's roles is to keep me on track, because like you can, like, if you go into the Dyatlov Reddit, I mean, you're going down a rabbit hole. There are tons of rabbit holes here. There's so much going on. So this is January of 1959. It's butt-ass cold. It's Siberia. It's Russia. But these kids are keen. So on January 23rd, they leave Sverdlovsk. on a train and they head north. And they're going to go north through a series of smaller and smaller towns. They're going to take trains. They're going to take buses. They will get sort of hassled by the cops in train stations. There's just a whole series of like kids today kind of things. But they're very enthusiastic and they take their role as comrades seriously. They sing songs. There's a guy who has a mandolin and they make up songs, and it's a very, very wholesome. There are 10 of them. One guy peels back because of health issues, which I will get to shortly. But there are 10 of them. There are 8 dudes and 2 women. For the trip, the guys have promised that they're not going to smoke. The girls have made them promise that they're not going to smoke, and there's no alcohol. So it's a really it's a wholesome group, and they're spirited. Like they have a group journal. They have all their own journals. Most of them have cameras, black and white film, 1959 black and white film, and at one point they do they make a group newsletter, like a group newspaper. So this is like a great group of kids, and they're just all keen. You know, they've got their backpacks and their skis, and they hitch this series of rides, and they go farther and farther north.
Can I just say this sounds like the epic beginning to a really good like horror, like nature horror film. I mean, so far it's perfect. Like I can see the kids with their like little communist hats on and like looking out the train and taking pictures and laughing, and you're wondering how each one of them is going to get brutally murdered. So this is setting up a great film, really good.
It is. I do have to say, from a pure humanistic standpoint, like I've gotten to know some of these personalities because I've been looking at this. I'm no expert, but I've been looking at this case for many, many years. And there are a few characters who, you know, I feel like I've gotten to know some of their personalities. There are, and just as a warning, as a content warning, I will describe some kind of gruesome things, some injuries later. I mean, I've seen pictures of their bodies, and you know, like these are people, you know, right. And they had families who loved them. And this is one of the things about where true crime or these mysteries take on this cultural life of their own. I think it's important not to forget that they're people. Mm-hmm. And, and they were, kind of us. Like, I know that you're not an alpine tourer or a ski mountaineer, but I know for many years, I think you spent the holidays in a backcountry hut in Yosemite. Yeah. So these, most of us, I think, have a lot in common. These were adventurous folks. So I want to mention 4 key characters. There were 10. There were some investigators, but the 4 that you need to know, I've mentioned Igor Dyatlov, who was the leader. And then the 2 women were Zenaida Kolmogorova, whose nickname was Zina.
Well done on that pronunciation.
Thank you. And Ludmila Dubinina, she's the other woman. She was, I don't know if the word is sassy. She was outspoken. Like you knew what she was thinking. I think for better or worse. And then Zina was, she, at least 4 of the guys in the group had a crush on her or had a relationship. So she was a bit of a luminary. And Igor was found with her picture in his wallet or journal or something. And they may have been like sweet on each other. There was like a guy, I think, that she had been sweet with. So this becomes a plot point later. So I don't think that there was no active canoodling, but there was definitely, as a backdrop, there was maybe a little bit of intrigue. And one of the things that they talked about a lot, and Zina kept bringing them back to this. So they had a lot of time to talk. They're on buses, they're in the back of horse-drawn sleighs, they're on the train, they're sleeping in one big room together, until they get to like the start of the trek, is the nature of love. Like they talked a lot about love and the nature of love. So, I think Dubinina, she was 20. She was the youngest of the group. So like they're kids. They're
kids. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine doing all this. I mean, it sounds familiar.
Exactly. Yeah. So then the last person is Yuri Yudin. And Yuri is the guy who turned back. So eventually they get to this point where other kinds of transport can take them no further, and they're going to have to continue north on their skis under their own power. Yuri had a series of health issues, including a kind of I think it was rheumatism. He had a lot of pain. And so a lot of what we know about their last days is a combination of Yuri and what he knew about the group, and then the group journal. So Yuri turns back, and he is he passed away a few years ago, but he lived a full life, thanks to this pain that he had, where he felt like he couldn't go further and didn't want to hold the group up. So it's January 23rd. They leave. They keep going north, and on January 28th, Yuri turns back, and our group goes forward. And now there are 9 of them. So they are following a series of rivers. Not going to try to pronounce them. They see Mansi symbols on the trees. They start to encounter more deep snow. These are more, from the pictures I've seen, more kind of rolling hills. These are not super, super steep.
Okay.
They were really keen. I just think it was probably a lot of slogging. And one thing that I have not been able to discover is how they propelled themselves uphill with skis. So for those of you who aren't clear, if you were ski touring today, you put something on the bottom of your skis. It's an artificial skin. It has a nap on it, like a hair or a fur. And as you slide your ski up the hill, it goes with the nap and it slides forward. And then when you put your weight on the ski, it goes against the nap and resists sliding backwards. Some cross-country skis have like a fish scale pattern on them that enables them to do the same thing. I don't know what these guys were using. They talk at one point about breaking trail, and the snow's so deep that they basically throw their backpack in front of them to pack down the snow, and then they move forward, and then they take like 10 minutes at a turn, and then the person in the back like brings the backpack up. So they had lots of times where skis were getting the bottoms were getting glommed with snow, which anybody who's ever broken trail or skinned up something, it's a nightmare when skis sort of like glom onto your skull. So I'm kind of curious, like, did they just, I don't know how they did that. So they're moving forward. They're still excited. They're stoked. And on February 1st, they come to a point where they decide that they're going to set up a shelter in the woods. Their goal for this trip is a mountain called Ortiton. And much have been made about the name of Ortiton, which is in the Mansi language. Which
that
basically
doesn't sound
means,
Russian. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not Russian. It's Mansi. And it alternatively means things like dead mountain or don't go there.
Awesome.
Which from a horror standpoint, like,
it just gets better, man.
It just gets better. The Mansi are like, no, basically. It's windy, it's butt ass cold. There's no animals up there. There's no vegetation up there. It's sort of like just like it basically means don't bother.
Are the Mansi, I've never heard of them before. Are they like on reserve? I don't know anything about the system. Are they just living in like little rural kind of villages? Are there a lot of them?
I don't know what their numbers are today. There are not a lot of them. Somebody should fact check me on this. I want to say there's only like 1,000 Mansi speakers alive today. It's declined. I don't know that they're on formal reservations. I can't really speak to that.
Okay.
They are hunters. Mm-hmm. They're woods people. So they log and things. They're not like the Sami, like they're not reindeer herders. They're not nomadic. Okay. But they are intimately connected to the natural world.
Okay.
So I've seen some of the photos of their symbols on trees, directing each other. Reminds me a little bit of like what you see from like the Basque sheep herders in Idaho, where they leave symbols on trees. And I can just tell you right now, the Mansi did not murder them. Okay. The Mansi people who were in that area are known as being super friendly, super helpful. They participated in the search.
Oh, wow.
They've helped out Russian people who are, or Soviets who were lost. Like by every measure, apparently they're just like good folks.
Okay.
So, like Dead Mountain, some of the media that has come out over the years about Dyatlov, like the primary book, like if you want to read one book, it's by an American documentary filmmaker named Donnie Eicher, and it's called Dead Mountain. And he's probably
name.
done a better job of, it's a no-brainer, right? It's a great name, even if it's not entirely accurate. So they're heading to Dead Mountain to don't go there. What the hell are you thinking? And they decide to cache some stuff. And so they make a storage shelter at the edge of some woods. And they leave a bunch of stuff, including the mandolin, which they were really sad about. And they are going to head up toward what is now known as Dyatlov Pass. I honestly don't understand why they did this. The weather was kind of going south. It was windy. It was cold. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's freaking cold. And it's
were
windy.
they prepared for that? Like, presumably they were, right? Like, this isn't radically cold for that zone.
It's not. They were prepared, and from our modern eyes, we're like, oh my god, they didn't have Gore-Tex. You know, they had wool. You know, they had waxed canvas. They were bundled up. This was not their first ski touring rodeo. But still, like, I don't care how bundled up you are. Like, if you're breaking trail and it's 0 degrees and it's blowing 30 miles an hour, the visibility is going to shit. You're like one side of your face is turning numb and caked with rime. So what they do, the Igor decides, or the group decides, that they're going to go they're going to go up this hill, which is pretty open. There's no vegetation on it. It's not very steep. And they're going to set up their tent in a pretty open space. As somebody who set up a lot of tents in the mountains, I don't get it, frankly. But and there's been a lot of debate about why they would do that. They decide to stop at 3:00. So the sun is setting at 5, but of course it's windy. I don't know how much snow is falling, but there's a lot of snow transport. And so from the pictures that exist, there are about 10 pictures that exist from that day. It just doesn't look like a whole lot of fun. Which is why I say I don't know why they actually left the shelter of the trees. They didn't really gain a lot of vertical. They didn't gain a lot of northward distance. If it had been me, I would have stayed at that shelter and said, you know what? Let's call it good. It's noon. Let's call it good. We'll chill. We've got the mandolin. Let's just hang out here.
Are there bears? I mean, it's winter. Like, why? Is that why you would leave the trees? Like, I agree. It makes no sense.
No, it's
snow loading on the trees. Like, is that an issue? Like,
no, the trees are from what I can tell, they're birches, they're cedars. Like, picture like something far north, where it's a little bit like taiga, it's not super dense forest. Like, it's not undense in the springtime. There's a lot of deciduous trees, but it looks a little bit like the Northeast in some ways, like in the wintertime.
You could build a snow cave in the trees just as well as you could on an open plain, right? Like, if that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it would be a lot easier because you wouldn't really have as much snow.
Weird.
Yeah, but they did what they did. It's hindsight's 2020. So they move forward, and it takes them a couple hours to set up the tent. The tent is well used. It has been repaired. I think it belongs to Dyatlov, and I think that they sewed a couple of tents together, and it holds all of them. So it holds all 9 of them. And at this point now, they have been tenting since January 28th when they got, if not sooner. So they're pretty well dialed. Like, how it is when a tent, like, you get like the stove goes here, our packs go here, like, you get a system down. So they go to settle in for the night, and there's some things that are still will never be understood about exactly what happened. They did not set up the stove. It may be that they, and I don't recall if they had wood with them. They certainly had wood down, a little bit lower in the trees, but they didn't set up the stove. So I don't know why they have the stove, if they have firewood and if they don't use it. It may have just been a pain in the ass. It was a stove that Dyatlov and somebody else built. It was not light. It had a chimney that sort of went out the front of the tent.
Okay.
But they had dinner. They had their packs all laid out, and the packs were, I think they were in the tent, and they laid down on top of the packs. And then there were not a spoiler to say that we do find the tent later. And we know this because of the things that were sort of in the tent. There was like slices of ham, there was some like cocoa. So whatever happens to them, it's not clear exactly when it happened. Okay. So I'm going to jump forward to them not returning, because I think it's important to know the sequence of events.
Okay.
So they are due back on in this town called Vizay, where they're going to telegraph that they're okay on February 12th. This was a long trip, multi-weeks. 1959, nobody's got, they're not carrying radios, obviously no cell phones, so there's this slush period, they've got some wiggle room. They have these margins for not coming back. So February 12th, they don't come back. Nobody really thinks anything of it. On February 15th, their relatives are starting to worry because they were actually due back in Sverdlovsk on the 13th. On the 16th, Igor Dyatlov's sister, Rufina, she's just like, she's had enough.
Yeah.
And so she alerts the school administrator. She's like, dudes, they're not back yet. We expected to hear from them at least 4 days ago. What's going on? The school administrators basically shut them down. So this is where paranoia, conspiracy of Soviet stuff starts to come into play, because there's a lot of cover your ass elements that seem to be going on the part of officials. So in fact, at one point, one official telegrams back to like school administrators, I think it is, that the group has arrived in the state. like there's weird stuff that happens like this where you're like, what?
Hey, I've seen Chernobyl. That's kind of how that whole thing went down, right? Like it's just constantly everybody trying to pretend like nothing's going wrong. I get it.
Right. Absolutely. If you've seen Chernobyl, I think you have a pretty good sense of what it was like in terms of information control, paranoia, officials covering their butts, doing what they thought the officials above them would want them to do. You just mistrust throughout the system, right? So they're not sure, what's going on. So February 16th, Igor's sister's like, hey, rattles the cage. On February 17th, things get really interesting. All throughout the Urals, there are reports of lights and orbs flying in the sky. There's reports from hunters, from hikers, and even from military personnel. Now, granted, this is like the heart of, the Soviet military industrial complex, but like military folks are going, wait, there's something weird going on here. And it's not just one or two, it's all over the place. And I think that's a good spot for us to pause. We'll be right back after the break.
The key to happiness is pretty simple. Work less, play more, drink coffee. At Long Weekend, we designed our blends to be up for anything. Unfussy, always delicious, and roasted to order. Get your beans today at longweekend.coffee. Adventure Journal is a quarterly print magazine featuring inspiring stories, incredible photography, and fantastic design. If you love traveling, the outdoors, and adventure, you'll love AJ in print. Support independent media and subscribe at subscribetoaj.com.
Welcome back. When we left, things were just starting to get weird. Quick summary, we have 9 ski tours in the Ural Mountains in Russia in the dead of winter It's ridiculously cold. It's windy because it's Russia in the middle of winter. The families want to know why the heck their loved ones aren't back. And the school administrators who back this whole thing are ghosting them. And, oh, yes, there are weird light orbs in the sky all over the Ural Mountains. What is going on here?
So I need to know more about the orbs. I need to know, are we talking hot air balloon size orbs? Are we talking stationary orbs?
We're talking moving orbs.
Okay.
It's not being a orb viewer myself. I'm not quite sure how hard. I'm guessing it's not easy to judge size as a regular consumer of UFO Reddit. There's all kinds of orbs.
Are there no, okay, I'm not, you're much more of a snow person than I am. Is this a thing? Do people report seeing weird, like, does light do weird things in a blizzard where you might see an orb? Have the skies cleared at this point?
A good question. I don't know what the weather is on February 17th, 1959 there. Light does weird things in the winter, in the snow, in the mountains. I've seen where I've been ski touring where it's completely socked in and it's snowing. But the sun is kind of coming through that cloud cover.
That's what I'm thinking.
And it's sort of like this glowing thing, but it's very obviously the sun.
And these people would have seen this all the time, so that wouldn't have been remarkable, right? This is obviously something really weird.
No, it wouldn't have been remarkable. Yeah. And people looked at what, like, the state of the moon, the phase of the moon. Not an issue. It's just not an issue.
All right.
And I've seen a few weird things in the sky, and we're visual creatures and we do pattern recognition. So I think we know, like, if we haven't seen something before, right? Yeah. Like, I think these orbs, it wasn't a Starlink chain of satellites. Like, people were just like, what? And there were so many reports of these throughout the Urals. And as we'll see, this was not the first or last time there were reports of orbs. Okay. Orbs. Yes. Orbs. So, it takes a while for the Soviet apparatus to spin up and take this thing seriously. They actually start searching. They create a formal search on February 20th. So, they were expected to be heard from on the 12th. We give them a few days in case weather's bad, but they were thought to be back in Sverdlovsk on the 13th. So this is a big lag, right? Like, if you're your family member, you're probably
enraged. Yeah.
Pretty worked up about this. So a formal search begins on the 20th. They start flying people in. The head of the sports club gets flown in by helicopter to the nearest town for staging. They take a surveillance plane out, but the weather goes south again, and they land also on February 20th. For reasons that are still not fully explained, the local municipality, Ivdel, the prosecutor's office there, opens a criminal investigation into the case of the missing hikers, which, by my measure, is weird.
That's super weird.
Like, we've got 9 young adults missing. We have no idea what's happened to them, but at this point, we're probably feeling okay. They had food, they had shelter, I had all this stuff. It's not their first time in the mountains. So why would you do that? Kind of weird. Okay. So 22nd, time is ticking away. A search party goes out, and it's actually led by another student from UPI named Boris Slobstov. Boris was he was a leader of another group of ski tourers that was out at the same time. In fact, they went out together, like on the train. They sort of shared their route for a while, then they kind of split and then went different ways. And so Slobstov was expecting to reconnect with the Dyatlov party later, and he didn't. So he becomes a natural person for them to lean on to help do the searching. So search parties converge on the 23rd. They're searching by plane. They're searching by helicopter. On the 25th, a search helicopter finds ski tracks. So now we're like almost 2 weeks after these guys are are lost and missing. And they tell Slobstov and his party to go and to follow these tracks. So they follow the tracks, and finally, sure enough, on February 26th, they find the tent. The tent is set up in the middle of the slope, about 12 miles from Dead Mountain, and in snow and seemingly untouched. And there's nobody around.
Nobody in the tent.
Nobody around the tent. Nobody
Okay.
in the tent. Nobody around the tent. No bodies.
Okay.
So search
Because they're in the
groups-
orbs. They're in the orbs. They've been taken to the orbs.
That is a theory.
Okay.
That was a theory. Okay, February 27th, they start converging on the tent. And here's where things really go sideways, because there's ostensibly a criminal investigation. We still don't know what has happened to anybody in this group. Slobstov, somebody in his search party, slashes open the tent with their ice axe, trying to so they don't have to undo the front of the tent for some reason. People are stepping. It's weird. People are stepping all over the surroundings of the tent. Basically, if it's a crime scene, they have totally screwed the pooch on the crime scene. So on February 27th, though, they see a set of 9 footprints leaving the tent toward the valley, and they appear to be walking. And they find these footprints because each of their feet compress the snow, so that the snow now is more compact, and it's been preserved by the scents. I'm going to compress a little bit here and fast forward. We ultimately know that there were 3 tears in the tent, and later, forensically, they discovered that they were cut by a knife, and there are 2 that are cut at eye level, at about the size of maybe 3 inches, and a longer one where a body could come out. And forensically, they looked under a microscope, and they discovered that these were not natural tears. They were caused by a knife, and they were slashed from the inside of the tent.
Okay.
Okay.
Like viewing holes. Sounds
like viewing holes.
Okay.
Okay. So what happened? Where did they go? And why in the world would they cut their tent in the middle of a storm in the middle of the night? So later in the day on February 27th, they find 2 bodies.
Okay.
And they're both young men named Yuri. They're found at the base of a cedar tree, and it's about 1,300 yards from the tent.
Holy shit. That's a pretty far. That's a long way.
It's a really long way. Yeah, it's a really long way. And so they're found, not quite in embrace, but they're sort of cuddled up together. And there's a fire. There's the remains of a fire at the base of it. So it's a cedar tree, and it's about 25 feet tall. And so the investigators eventually realized that they hypothesized that the fire burned for about 2 hours, roughly. So they were able to get a fire going for 2 hours. And they also, there's twigs and other branches that they've not burned. So it's not clear, did the fire go out? What happened? There are also branches broken going all the way up the tree, and there is skin found along the bark of the tree. So they surmise that one of these Uris climbed up the tree to break off branches, maybe slid down. Okay. Neither one of them is wearing shoes. Their boots turn out to be, everybody's boots turn out to be in the tent. Okay.
Oh, like they ran out without their shoes on.
Right. Okay. Exactly.
Is this tree on the way to something? Is it clearly if they were going to run toward a town, you would go in that direction?
No, this is pretty remote.
Okay. All right.
So it's weird. They're not wearing jackets. One of them has on a checkered shirt, a pair of swim trunks under his long underwear. The only the right leg of his underwear remains, and the other has been torn off. Not the leg, but the long underwear. Okay. His feet, he's not wearing socks. He's got bare feet. The other guy, the other Yuri, is wearing an undershirt, a checkered shirt, long underwear, briefs, and socks. But his clothes are brutally like shredded, and pieces of them are apparently missing. And they have burns on their body, and they also have injuries to their hands that appear to be the kind of injuries like you might get if you were in a fist fight.
Wow. Okay.
Which has led some people to think that there was like a love triangle or love quadrangle, and that these guys got into a fight over Xena.
Okay.
So Yuri Yudin is like, he shuts that down. He's like, no, that's just not the case. Later in the afternoon on the 27th, they find the bodies of Xena and of Dyatlov, and they're about 300 yards from the tent. And they are in the middle of the slope, and they are facing uphill, kind of on their bellies, not next to each other, but separated by a significant distance. And it appears that they may have been trying to make their way back to the tent. Okay. So here's what we have. It's late February. We have 4 bodies, and we have the tent. Okay. And we have this mystery of what in the world was going on in the tent. And investigators are telegraphing back to authorities, I guess, in Sverdlovsk, the school, like, the tent is sliced. There's the stuff in there's the shoes. There's the ham, the sliced ham. There's a stove that hasn't been used. There's the journals. There's the cocoa that it's not clear what's going on. And then there's the 9 sets of footprints and the 4 bodies. So weird. So we need to jump ahead a little bit. March 5th, another body is found about 300 yards from the bodies of Dyatlov and Xena. And we have this mystery, and we don't know what happened to the other groups. And the families, of course, are extremely upset. They're distraught. They're grieving, and they end up having funerals for the 5 dead people the 5 dead folks that we now have their bodies. All of them died of hypothermia. So that's a relatively simple forensic thing. So it appears that something or someone has forced them from the tent in the middle of the night, underdressed, and they basically froze to death. But they have these kind of weird injuries.
This is unexplainable injuries otherwise. And they were climbing trees, maybe even to get a look at something.
Perhaps. We just don't know.
Okay.
And then there's
really far from the tent. I mean, they were trying, it's like they were trying to get the hell away from the tent.
Right. Like, let's say it's the middle of the night and you leave your tent in a blowing snowstorm. It's 0 degrees and you don't have your shoes on.
Yeah.
Like, why would you be 1,300 yards?
Right.
You know, like if it's dark, are they trying to get to this other shelter tent? Like, it's just unclear.
I mean, that's almost a mile, right?
1,300 yards? Yeah. Yeah, it's over a kilometer.
God, that's crazy.
In the snow, it's a long way.
Yeah, no wonder they died of hypothermia. My God.
Right.
Okay.
So they have the funeral, and things just continue to be weird because the authorities don't want them to have the funeral. And then they don't want them to have the funeral publicly. And so they kind of squash like all these efforts on the families. And like, this is now a big deal in the Soviet press and in this town, in the Russian press. And, you know, there were a lot of people from the school, and they had a lot of friends. And so they end up having the funeral, and they put like all their bodies in one grave, and they have one marker. But the authorities are just like weird, like kind of bonkers weird about like this whole thing. And continuing to spark a lack of trust because they just seem kind of dodgy. Okay, so there's still now 4 people remaining. Okay, we don't know what's happened to Ludia, Dubinina, and 3 other folks. Okay, March 17th, more light orbs in the sky, reported by meteorologists, reported by soldiers. Members of a search team also report orbs. Really? Weird. Okay. Really weird.
I'm on Team Orb at this point.
You're on Team Orb.
It's the orbs.
Okay. So we're gonna like bring some closure to like the timeline here pretty quick, and we're gonna get to the theories. Okay. March 31st, more orbs. April 3rd through 6th is when the forensic investigation is going on the tent. Early April and into May, they're trying to figure out like they're discovering like, okay, they figured out like, okay, we now know that the slashes are from inside. On May 3rd, a Muncie searcher finds a bunch of branches that have been cut by a knife. And they're kind of like poking out of the snow in a ravine near a different cedar tree. And this is a long way. This is like a mile from the tent now. And so they start probing with avalanche probes. And on May 4th, they find 4 bodies in the creek at the bottom of the ravine.
And that's the rest of them, right?
That's the rest of them.
Okay.
So the first body, they do the forensic, they do the autopsy. And the first body had died from hypothermia. So, that makes sense, right? So froze to death. The second body has 5 fractured ribs and severe hemorrhaging internally, and no source or external injuries. So there's not like bruising or anything, and they died from the hemorrhaging. So body number 2 in the creek has some kind of traumatic injury that killed them pre-mortem. Okay, so these injuries happened before they died.
Yeah.
Okay. The next body, same thing: fractured skull, massive hemorrhaging, injuries consistent with some kind of accident or trauma, but like no real external signs of it. And so then we get to Ludmila, who is face down in the water. Ludmila died of massive thoracic damage, so chest, lungs, ribs. 9 of her ribs are broken. She has massive internal hemorrhaging, and the heart, her ventricle, is torn or severely damaged, and then her tongue is missing.
Okay, I've heard of that. Okay, so the people the other than the hypothermic one, these people were messed up. I mean, it sounds like they were crushed, or now I get where the infrasound idea comes from. But the other ones they find are just hypothermic. So it's like they somehow the ones that actually had some trauma are gathered together.
They are, yeah. Okay. So it appears that the first 5 died probably relatively quickly, and died from exposure. These 4 folks lived longer. They got a long way from the tent. Now they're not. Keep in mind, they're not on skis and they don't have shoes. Okay. And the other thing, this is one of the things that's sort of like you can rabbit hole on, but like all of their clothing is patchwork. So
like they just grabbed whatever they could or something.
Like they grabbed whatever they could from other people. So I don't remember all the details, and again, you can get in the weeds on this. But Ludmila, I want to say, is wearing, like somebody else's socks or half of their underwear. So like it's as if they have taken partial clothing off of bodies to try to stay warm.
Okay,
but not like taking their long sleeve shirt and their long underwear and pulling that on, but like taking like the calf from their long underwear pants.
So bizarre. I mean, I guess that sounds like panic, but I don't know. That's I don't know.
It's weird. It's weird. All right. So let's take a step back and look at kind of the big view here, and then we'll dive into these theories. Okay. So the evidence that we have, even though it's now 60 some years old, it was not as well documented as it could have been because of all these search parties stepping on these things and because of Soviet paranoia. So we don't know exactly what is what. We do know a few things. We do know that the tent was set up in the snow and that the front of the tent was unviolated. It was still closed. It closed with these sort of like kind of claps, almost like wooden buttons in a way, like wooden toggle buttons. That was still intact. The group from inside the tent cut what appear to be 2 eye holes, and then they all apparently left the tent through this slash in the middle of the night and then walked seemingly in single file, not in a hurry, off into the snow somewhere. So what scenario explains that? Like, what do you think? Like, it's weird, right?
Well, I mean, I've heard that the theories generally coalesce around some sort of avalanche, but that doesn't make any sense given what you just described. And it sounds all to me like something scared the hell out of them, and they could see it or they wanted to see it, and just left the. I mean, not in a hurry is weird, but it almost sounds like they thought something was coming for them and they just had to flee the tent as fast as they could.
Exactly, because they don't have the stove going, but and I don't know if this was the sort of group where they left food out when they went to bed. I mean, I've never been in a group of campers that does that. So maybe they were awake. Maybe they hadn't gone to bed. There was the 2 guys from the 2 Uris from the cedar tree were a little bit better dressed than the others. There's some evidence that they'd maybe gone out to take a leak. So I don't know if there was urine in the snow or so there's this supposition that they'd gone out to pee before settling into bed and maybe were better dressed and then something happened. They clearly left the tent and they left the tent unprepared. So they must have been terrified.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrified because they didn't take the time to put their boots on. But then how do you explain this set of 9 footprints apparently stepping in each other's tracks, which, kind of makes sense in the snow. You're packing the snow down, but like they're not running. Like if they're in a panic, you'd be
running like, and falling and stuff.
And they'd be all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So earlier you asked me if there was a definitive.
Yeah.
So yes, in 2019, so this has remained a source of fascination worldwide and also in Russia. And there's been a lot of pressure to, open up records and reinvestigate. So in 2019, there was a final investigation that came to the conclusion that it was an avalanche. And in 2021, a pair of very highly renowned Swiss snow experts did modeling and did a study and said that an avalanche, it technically could have been an avalanche. But here's the deal. This is not very steep terrain. So the actual tent was set up on, again, it's always hard to get like a true, like really accurate reading when there's snow and snow built up, but it was around 18 degrees. And a slope of 18 degrees is almost never going to avalanche. Like, I mean, it probably could under some circumstances, but it would be exceptionally rare. And then the slope above them, it kind of steepens a little bit above them. And this is bare, there's no vegetation. Okay. So it's like this windswept kind of dome, basically. So above them, it's a little bit steeper and it could have avalanched. And, but not a lot steeper. And so a lot of folks are like, okay, it's an avalanche because like what could it have been? Like what? So the theories are easily like rejected. Like it wasn't a Yeti, right? there was no other tracks.
Yeah.
Okay. And that stems from like this little sort of group newspaper that they did. They talked about spotting a Yeti. And so people like took them literally that they spotted. It was a joke, right? It was not escaped convicts from one of the gulags. Probably not KGB. They probably didn't stumble on some military experiment, because you have this group of 5 that's died from hypothermia. So like if it was some other sort of human thing, then like why would
KGB would just shoot them? Like who? And why would, like, it'd be easy to hide it. You just shoot them and say, I don't know, they got lost. Next. Like there's no reason for the KGB to stage something weird like that.
Right. There's a lot of conspiracies about staging that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. So, I mean, I think that we have to look at the possibility of something natural, and the most likely natural thing seems to be an avalanche. But people who are close to this, not the authorities, but people who've kind of made it their life's work to study these things, just immediately called BS on that. They're like, it's not an avalanche. It's not steep enough to an avalanche. And the photos, which you can look at online, of the tent that they came upon a couple of years later, there's absolutely no evidence of avalanche debris. So
wild.
So it's wild. So a couple of days ago, I talked to Doug Chabot. Doug is the head of the Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Center. We actually profiled Doug in Adventure Journal in print a few issues ago, because he has, you'll have to read the story, but he has a strong connection to Afghanistan, and sort of has become he sort of joked the Taliban's avalanche forecaster, but he's sort of like the guy from the West who has tried to help them institute usable snow safety protocols over there. So I called Doug because Doug was quoted in a New York Times piece when the Swiss researchers a couple of years ago said it theoretically could have been an avalanche. So I called up Doug, and Doug was like, hard no, not an avalanche.
Really? Right off the bat?
Right off the bat.
And he knew the story pretty well?
He knew the story pretty well.
Okay.
Like he's not a Dyatlov aficionado.
Okay.
But he's a snow expert. In fact, I talked to him when he was in Bend, Oregon at the snow. There's a snow safety research college that they have every couple of years where they all get together and share papers. And he was in the middle of that, so he knows snow like nobody knows snow. And his theory is he looks at the wind and he thinks that the snow built up and collapsed part of the tent, and that freaked them out, and that they went running out.
Oh,
I don't buy it. But he's like, it didn't slide. Like I looked at the photos, and the New York Times is saying this is avalanche debris, and National Geographic did a story, and they're saying avalanche this is debris. And I'm looking at the photos of the snow in the tent. I'm like, that's not avalanche debris. It's not.
Well, how would they get crushed by snow building up and collapsing the tent? I mean, that would take an enormous amount of snow to do that.
Well, I asked Doug about the injuries, and he sort of shrugged. He's like, yeah, like you can find explanations for these other things. I think the important thing is to look at like the big inciting event. And that's where, for me, his theory doesn't hold water, because like, how would these people get, like how would parts of their heart be sort of torn and all these other things?
Why would they separate like that? I mean, I guess if a few of them went off for help and didn't come back, and the other ones didn't know which direction they went, but why would they have been crushed so far from the?
Okay,
it seemed okay. That's freaking me out, because if you find people that are crushed and died from those injuries a long way from the tent, then that didn't happen where they were camped.
No,
right?
they could not have traveled, and an avalanche did not sweep them into the creek bed. Now, creek beds and ravines are what sort of mountain people, snow experts call terrain traps.
Sure.
Right, and it's because like if you were like skiing along the side of a creek and the snow there collapsed on the bank, which it could sweep you into the water upside down. So that theoretically that could happen, but I don't think there were a lot of steeps around the creek bed. So now, Doug has spent a lifetime looking at this stuff, and, I take what he says seriously. And, I talked to him about the injuries a little bit, and he's spent a lot of time up on Denali and around Denali Pass. And, he has dug a lot of bodies out. And so, again, kind of content warning, he was telling me about something that is rather disturbing. He dug out a couple of folks who had pitched their tent in a crevasse on Denali Pass, and the snow bridge, the snow collapsed part of the tent. And I don't know that they cut their way out, but they got out of the tent and they couldn't get out of the crevasse. And this one guy had clawed an alcove into the ice of the crevasse. And Doug said it looked like he was sort of half in and out. It was almost like he was in like this almost like egg-shaped thing that he carved out. And he had, again, this speaks to his desperation. He had carved his fingers down at the snow to the point where the finger was gone down to the second knuckle. The bones were gone. So Doug has seen people in these absolutely desperate situations where they've ended up with really weird, physical impacts on their body because they were trying to survive. And so I think that he looks at the situation and he's like, well, okay, hands contused or, whatever. Now they probably didn't get to a fist fight, but who knows what it was. Where I disagree on that is this idea that they cut these holes. We're pretty sure it's the middle of the night, right? Like it's dark. And maybe they've got flashlights inside. We know that the stove wasn't working or they didn't have it put together. So why would you why would you hurt the integrity of your tent, your shelter in the middle of winter, super cold, blowing snow to look at something in the middle of the night? Like, what would you be looking at?
Really good point. Why would, yeah.
Okay. So avalanche, possible snow collapsing the tent. And then the other theory that I think is really interesting is Donnie Eichers, who wrote the book Dead Mountain. And so his theory is this thing called infrasound, which is a very rare meteorological thing. And the thumbnail on this is that it takes a very specific topographical environment to create this sound. It's not a sound you can hear. It's infrasound. So would that be higher or lower? Infra? Higher?
I don't know.
You can't hear it.
I don't know.
But, sorry, science guys, I can't remember. But it creates fright, paranoia, terror. Like this sound has been known in different creepy groups like probably CIA, KGB. People have experimented with military weapons using sound. In fact, like the whole Havana syndrome thing that's going on with people and their brain damage. I mean, they're sort of looking at sound waves for this. So I don't know if anything exists, but we know that sound can have these like weird effects on folks and cause them to do really strange things. So Eicher's theory is that they didn't hear this thing. They basically just freaked out. What do you think?
And cut
their way out of the tent. Cut their way out of the tent.
And somehow pummeled their friends to death.
Well, but the thing is, like, those injuries happened later. Those injuries, so like 3 of those injuries, that was the cause of death. These massive injuries. So, and an avalanche didn't sweep them into the ravine. I don't know. Maybe they'd survived for a number of days or whatever, and they were weakened, and they fell into the ravine, but they weren't like up against boulders or rocks. So the gal, who had the most severe injuries, she was face down in a creek in the water, which may explain, why her tongue was missing.
Or animals ate it. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why, and some of their eyes were missing. And again, like, there could have been some predation going on.
Well, so, you've presented me with lots of odd UFO facts over the years, and I usually dismiss them. I'm very much there's always a natural explanation for things, and this doesn't add up. I mean, this really doesn't. Like, nothing else you've ever said to me makes me think, aliens are visiting us. And I'm not saying this was aliens. I still don't think aliens have been here. But I want to know what those orbs are all about. And I want to know if the Russians had some sort of... It makes more sense to me that there was actually some sort of sound-based like device that they were testing out. That at a certain point, that becomes the simpler explanation than trying to piece together all these like actual natural occurrences that could have caused these things to happen. I mean, I this whole time, by the way, I mean, I've heard of this before. I assumed all the bodies were either in the tent or right next to it. I had no idea they were so far away from the tent. I also didn't realize that they had died at different times. So this to me smacks of something very odd going on that scared the living shit out of these kids, and potentially, I guess there's a natural there. I guess if you fell into a creek, you could smash your ribs and dive internal. I mean, I don't know how deep this creek is. I guess that kind of makes some sense.
It's not deep. It's not deep.
But,
it's a few inches. It's a creek. It's just a creek, and
that's the weirdest part to me.
You've
or
got,
the guys climbing, like you wouldn't climb to get branches down. That doesn't make any sense. But he did.
There were branches broken off of high. So
maybe he climbed to get a good view. That's what that sounds like to me.
Or maybe, in the middle of the night in the snow. I don't know. Or maybe to get away from something. And, the injuries, massive skull fracture.
Yeah,
right?
that's bizarre.
Nine ribs. Like they said it was the equivalent of like an auto accident.
Do we know there's no, is there no history of the Monsey attacking? I mean, if they're hunters, like the single tracks or something like that sounds very, very huntery.
Yeah, but those were leaving the tent and going downhill.
The tent.
Okay, so we got to unpack the UFO thing because you can laugh.
I knew it was coming.
I don't know. And, I get chills when I'm sort of even relating this. Like, all that I've studied this, like I don't know, but I'm kind of on Team UFO.
Yeah.
So let me tell you kind of why I'm on Team UFO. First off, a couple of years ago, I would have been like, yeah, what? No, I'm a rationalist, right? But the last couple of years, obviously, we've had these revelations coming out from the Navy. We've seen these videos. We've had testimony before Congress. We've had our military come out and say, there is weird stuff in the sky. It shows up on our sensors. It is material, and we don't know what it is. And that's a whole other discussion, but like what that could be. But like people who know say, we don't have this technology. China doesn't have this technology. Russians don't have this technology. And I think that when you combine that with some of the things that are happening at the forefront of physics, where people are saying, you know what, the universe might not even exist without human observation. Like there's all kinds of crazy stuff that's happening at the forefronts of quantum physics, which I can barely begin to understand, but that we don't even really know the nature of reality. So a whole lot of people who are much smarter than I am are saying there's really weird stuff going on out there. And then in terms of like UFO encounters and abduction things and, these tales of orbs, there are tens of thousands of well-documented cases that if people were faking this stuff, and certainly people are faking and hoaxing probably a significant number of these, but they're not faking all of these things. Like there are these things that you just can't explain. Okay, so I'm going to tell you one last thing here as we're coming to a close. So after the funerals, the friends and relatives, the people who love them were like, they were trying to figure out like what in the world was going on. So one of the kids' fathers was talking to other hikers who were out there and just trying to explain. So this guy, the father of a guy his name was Georgie. So Georgie's dad talked to some of these other groups. Remember I was telling you like Slobstov, and there were these other groups of ski tours out there. Mm-hmm. He talked to some of these folks. And these hikers told him that on February 1st, the night that all of this went down, there were two separate hiking groups out there that witnessed weird stuff in the sky. And what this guy said, I'm reading from Iker's book. So Georgie's dad said, quote, they saw a strange phenomenon in the evening to the north from their locations. The extremely bright light. The light was so bright that even those hikers who were preparing to sleep in tents went out to look at it. For some time, the sound of strong thunder came from afar.
Well, so this is 59, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is like right in the teeth of military aviation experimentation. They're near military installations. I mean, I could see something like that being a potential thing. You know, some fancy Russian plane that was super loud flying around. I mean, that kind of makes some sense to me. Isn't that? I mean, that's kind of when all this is happening in the Southwest in the U.S. too.
It is, and for sure, the possibility that I mean, given all the military stuff that's going on in that area, that's a possibility. We don't know, we'll never know for sure, but all of the records and all of the witnesses and all of the investigation says that there was nothing going on militarily at that time. So I don't know, but the idea that there's something bright in the sky and weird that all of a sudden is lighting up your tent in the middle of the night, like you've been sleeping in your truck or whatever, your tent, like somebody like headlights hit your truck in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, you're kind of like, that freaks you out. For sure.
I mean, the infrasound makes a lot of sense. I've never heard that's a natural, that could be a natural phenomenon. That's pretty interesting. I mean, that answers a lot of questions. It really is. It really comes down to the like pretty traumatic injuries that just doesn't really add up. I mean, that like, even if it is a UFO, I mean, that doesn't really explain that either. Like it does not explain it. If you had a light, like a crazy bright light outside in the middle of nowhere in the sky, that explains why they might slice open the tent and take a look. I think I still don't understand why you'd cut your tent open. That's the thing that makes no sense.
See, these are the things that don't jive. Why would you cut your tent open instead of taking time to open the front of the tent? Because it's your only shelter.
I would never do that.
Why would you leave your tent in the middle of the night, super ass cold, in the snow, and not put your jacket on, not put your boots on? And then why would you leave in a single file line that clearly you're not running and you're not panicked at that point? Like it shows no evidence of panic.
So the avalanche idea would be, or the snow, maybe not an avalanche necessarily, but a buildup of snow behind the tent falls on the tent, crushes them. There's some panic. Some of them go out one way. Others maybe got crushed by the snow, I guess, and then were like rolled or pushed by the wind somehow into this terrain trap. And they died over there, or they died already, and then they just got rolled into that. I mean, now I'm starting to come back around to natural causes.
So keep in mind that the slope is not steep at all.
Yeah.
So the idea of it gets less steep toward the creek. I mean, it rolls a little bit into the creek, but as you're coming down, it's pretty mild terrain. So it's not as if like it's a mesa and then it drops off and you could have had a buildup of snow. That's just not the topography of the land. There's no like fallen tree. There's no boulders that appear to have been moved.
Right. Pushed
around. I mean, some people speculate they were taken by a UFO and dropped from great height. But I mean, this is a good. I just don't know how to explain it, and nobody really. I mean, there are all kinds of explanations, but I think
maybe it was all of those things. Maybe a UFO came and triggered an avalanche, and while that was happening, that created the perfect situation for the infrasound to develop. All of these things could have happened, and the KGB killed some people too.
Yeah, but the KGB was wrestled to the ground by the Yeti.
Yes.
And it would help, which explains the abrasions on the hand.
Yes. And the Yeti was called in by the Monsi people.
And the Yeti actually weighs the equivalent of 9 people. So it looks like
the Yeti sat on somebody. Yes.
All right. That is the Dyatlov Pass mystery. I'm not satisfied. I don't know too many people are satisfied. I think we are going to be chewing on this for a long time, and I just in closing, I'm just sorry that people who were so young and seemed to have so much going for them, and were so excited about the natural world, that they had this tragedy that happened to them. Thank you guys. This is the Adventure Journal podcast. As you know, I would appreciate it. Follows, likes, all that other sort of good stuff. You can also, and I hope you will, subscribe to our beautiful printed quarterly. You can also subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. And you can do all of that at adventurejournal-com. No,
And,
adventure-journal.com.
Please also, what do you think? I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, let's hear your thoughts. It's probably just as good as anybody. Your guess is as good as anybody else's at this point. So
yeah, or leave us a
know what you
voicemail. I would love to see the conversation, because there are a lot of people that absolutely love the snow, know the snow. They are experts. You can do any search that for Dyatlov Pass is going to bring you to a site that is set up kind of a fan site that has tremendous documentation, that has translations of all the journals, pictures of the journals, all of the photos, the autopsy stuff, like anything that you would ever want to know about Dyatlov is there, and you can form your own opinions. But yeah, let us know.
Or if you've seen some orbs, let us know that too.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Take care. Appreciate you
Bye.
listening. Bye.